Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Robert, and I'll be your guide on this meditation practice that enters a space of mindfulness through the act of drawing. This week, I think we'll explore the relationship between the straight line and the curve. There are many ways to get between those two spaces. The straight line is just a curve straightened out of it, and a curve can take on many forms, from the complex and interwoven to the simple, organic, tectonic curve to a nice arc, circle, or bent line. In the warm-up, we'll explore a little bit about the way you want to work with curves today, and any of them are okay. The drawing that we make will be fairly abstract in nature. Really, each interaction looking at that experience between line and curve, and maybe adding a few other elements as well to balance out the page and just have some fun with it. Layering, bending, wrapping, intersecting will all be aspects we look into as we work, and then we'll let the rest unfold through the meditation, through the breath, and through the attention and awareness to what we are doing, where we are, and the presence of our paper and our medium. Speaking of which, I'm going to draw with a pen, maybe a little marker today, just on a pad of Bristol here, and see where that goes. A pencil handy if I ever want to do a little shading or change up the medium, but whatever you have at hand will work. So go ahead and gather supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. Work a little in the realm of line and curve and the space between them. Probably mostly work with a pen, but I have a colored pencil handy if something comes up, a little marker too, just to have available. So if you have a few things nearby that could be fun to experiment with, but just anything, pen or pencil will work. Setup's all good. Oh, for the introduction, warm-up time, we'll look a little at, for us, any of us, what a curve might be, and how it relates to that straight line. So we could start with a little piece of extra paper or the back of a page or something, and first draw some straight line, straightish, something that looks more like a line traveling somewhere between a couple of points. And in that, thinking about how we interact with that to turn it into a curve. There are a lot of types of curves. You could have kind of fun, quick, whimsical curving lines, something with its own character and energy. We have very mechanical curving lines that kind of follow an arc, bend a little bit like an elbow, things in planes. More kind of organic curving lines that bring with them a bit of tension, a bit of physicality, giving them that organic nature, just are a little less wobbly, and maybe anything in between, a circle being kind of a full curve of arcs. And in the warm-up, just testing a few out, see where you're feeling today. Any of them will kind of work in the exercise, and in fact, all can be a part of our time spent thinking and looking at the relationship between the curves here on this page, random, looking around, but even subtle things starting to layer up or move away from, to bend out or towards, to make spaces that narrow or widen, to block or intersect with a space as a line could move through the territory of whimsy. Lines can cross, overlap, run along, bend around. And from there, with these simple elements, feel free to draw a few more, just feeling out what you're feeling in terms of your hand moving today, having a sense of it. We'll let that shape the empty space of the page for us as we move through the exercise. The number of lines you draw, totally open to you. Maybe you end up with just 2 or 3 nice lines and curves, or 10s, 20s, 30s. Lots of time in here to just play and make decisions and see what happens in the abstract composition. Do a little preparing, maybe closing the eyes and looking at those curves and lines in your own mind, whatever shows up, some memory of what you just squiggled out onto the paper, or new ideas forming, the edges of things you recognize as curves, or the edges you recognize as lines, something like the paper at the edge of the book, forming those made objects that we see as straight edges, something like a plant or cloud, forming those moving curves. Taking a couple good solid breaths just to establish and transition from whatever was happening before in the morning to what's happening now. Breathing in to fill out a nice, comfortable, but a bit of tension to the lungs and abdomen. And then releasing it to soften, to sink into where you are in space, sitting, becoming present in your space, present in your surroundings. You feel ready after a few breaths, picking up the tool you want to draw with, finding a place on the page to engage the first mark, using the breath from the beginning to make a line. Starting somewhere and traveling along the breath, traveling through that space on the page, empty until marked, and now changed, something beginning. Each step along the way of the exercise, the chance to consider the new space, now one, for me, a little left, a little more right, a little diagonal. But what do you see in yours? Orthogonality, the horizontal, the vertical, the broken, cut through, the space around something present here. And now moving to the other side in the spectrum from a line, mostly straight, mechanical edge, to some form of curve that interacts with it. Breathing in again as you choose the space to start, the location of an edge. Bring into your mind, your intention, the way the curve can go, loose or tight, fast or slow. When you're ready, fill out some space with the breath, engage the paper, and let the curve form. Anything there builds that new relationship between two types of geometry, between two marks interacting with the paper. And now there's a space around them and between them. Perhaps they cross, perhaps they're separate. Each step as we enter into the drawing, taking that time between to look at what forms there on the paper, to think or decide or let the eye guide us to where the next interaction might be. At first I'll move a little back and forth between line and curve, but you can do whatever sequence works for you. When you're ready, finding the location to begin, breathing in, and on the exhalation, moving through space. And as we go, there may be little opportunities to add articulation to a line, point, a dot, a circle, something at the end, giving it direction and presence. Now the game begins again. This movement back and forth between the line and the curve, their dialogue in space. As the space becomes more defined, constrained, but more clear, present with the page, where the eye engages, breathing in to a location, and exhaling action. Two ends of a spectrum, straight to curved, playing out on the paper. Begin to move a little bit quicker in terms of this play between line and curve, choosing for a moment either one, this time a line, next time curve, breathing in to location, and exhaling interaction. Observing for the space of a breath or two, and then beginning again that inhalation to exhalation cycle, presence, location, and expression out onto the paper. In to find the starting place, out to define a new relationship between lines and curves, shaping the paper, shaping the open field our vision moves through. Depending on the size of the page, you'll get tense quickly or slowly. A few more rounds, kind of at your own pace, line to curve, curve to line. Whichever one starts to draw you in. In to locate, out to mark. A cycle that brings presence, the body action. A cycle that opens up a little bit of space for us to look and see. Or perhaps the eye to make a few natural decisions. The mind to communicate with what it sees and the mark that ends up happening. A few more lines or curves, and we begin to read into the drawing, to experiment with its space. You still have room, you can keep working, or at any time add a new line, curve of relationship, and your eyes see something, and your mind's drawn to it. Feel free to explore. But now that we have a field, a dense collection of these interactions, we can begin to read into it, perhaps layering lines, letting them work into spaces, emphasizing, accentuating direction, building density in some areas. Here, a layering of line draws me in, a doubling, giving the edge more prominence, extending a direction, but limiting the space based on context. Finding perhaps a little bit of repetition or rhythm to it, but always allowed to be playful here. Filling in some of that space between creating new emphasis, letting the eyes see and draw over things from before to give them greater value or prominence on the paper. And as your eyes begin to navigate the space, keeping some of that attention to the breath, to the presence you have with the page. Perhaps it's still a cycle of breathing in to find location and out to express. A normal breathing in the space between drawing to observe, interact, or very directed guiding breathing in between. Even closing the eyes for a moment, so when you reopen them, the mind can re-engage the paper. Finding opportunities to build relationships in those spaces, perhaps shapes nearly form when things cross or approach each other, zones play between curve and line, corners redirect, bring things together. And this is a place where we may move to another medium if you're interested. I think I'll bring over the pencil just to have a change, a feeling, an interaction, the space well formed, how many things to engage with. My curves a little more mechanical, have the remnants of an arc or a circle in some corners. I think I'll bring that in to what I see. A circle suggesting a radius. Another layer to the space of abstract geometric relationships. Other things a medium could do are enhance lines, give them color or thickness, a change in value or intensity to draw the eye somewhere. And we can take that time with all the space of the drawing to explore it for a few minutes and see what we find. Shapes, lines, curves, edges. even perhaps some shading. See where things are. See what you find. Just one medium. The geometry doesn't change. Lines, curves work with pen or pencil, anything we have handy. If you have a second medium, something heavier, lighter, different color, may change the character and quality of the line, bring immediate difference or emphasis to the page. Both ways can build up in their own language to what we follow, what we see. In the last few minutes from the time of exploring, what has emerged on the paper, which way of interacting with that space between lines and curves draws your attention, bringing more attention to it. Perhaps it's the bends, the elbows, the space where a curve wraps around another space. Perhaps it's the emboldening, it's intentional emphasizing of a line element, and see if that can be applied with great intensity and consistency across the drawing. Places it can bring new character and emphasis, can bring together that space in between, maybe by merging, changing local contexts, thickening, extending, using the eyes to observe the visual field, to bring nuance into some zones. Or taking that time to occasionally close the eyes, give the mind a chance to clean and clear what it's been seeing, and open them up again fresh. Keep exploring new on the page. A lot of time spent in the drawing, staring at it. It's easy to get lost. Sometimes we take a break, reopen the map, see where we are, and begin to journey again. But as we come towards the end of the exercise, we can let our senses re-engage and expand, both within ourselves and around ourselves. The breath now settled into a calm state. Do you notice it, or has it become automatic? That observation, the starting point, a thing always with us, always there to touch base with. Once observed, then you move outwards. Do you feel the expansion and contraction of the rib cage? Expansion of the diaphragm, the inflow of air into the body, being aware of it. Those senses of tactility, clothing, touching the skin or the muscle moving underneath. Move out through the limbs from the core, feeling the hand move around the page, feeling the elbow and wrist supported. Taking even these small actions on the paper and seeing how much they engage the body, how they work as a system. And have been working to support our action, feeling the fingertips move the pen or the pencil. Feeling the feet support us on the ground or hang in the air, depending on how you're positioned. Noticing all those things around us, the subtler ones, perhaps small sounds, more fragrance in the air. The room still there around us, even if we've been more present locally for a while, the drawing. And the noticing of that room pulling us back to a wider context, perhaps drifting us out of the action of drawing. A few breaths to disengage, to let the pen or pencil come to a rest, to close the eyes, and take a few natural but longer breaths, not forcing, not holding, just breathing in and out. And when you feel ready, opening the eyes, opening the hands, seeing the play on the page, abstract, connected, and ready for maybe further exploration. We enjoy the doodle of the exercise and playing in that space of abstract relationships between point, line, curve, and maybe some shape. Then you might be interested to explore some work of Paul Klee, an artist from the 20th century, and the abstract movement both in painting and drawing that happened in the kind of 1920s and 30s as inspiration for future creative works, or just keep drawing. See what you come up with. See what shapes, tectonics of line and curve, points can frame, move, connect, and make space, both there on the page and in your mind, for a little bit of imagination, a little bit of opening, and a little bit of creativity. If you enjoyed the exercise, please let me know in the comments below what you found. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and share with your friends. If you want to see more of these, there are usually new episodes each week here on Wednesday, so feel free to subscribe to the channel, and I hope whatever you get into for the rest of the day or evening continues with that flow, creativity, and imagination, so you can draw well. Thank you.